Hello, I'm Darcy Bits, and welcome to another new set Pauper Commander review. We're counting down the top 10 interesting new Pauper commanders for Murders at Karlov Manor, as well as any from the Clue expansion that is coming out alongside of it. In Pauper Commander, you can use any uncommon creature as your commander to pilot your deck of 99 commons. So, what is useful is very different. For example, there's a lot of new cards that interact with new set mechanics that are basically useless as a Pauper Commander because there are no cases at common. So a creature that cares about cases isn't useful to us. One card that especially stood out to me was Persuasive Interrogators, which is a black card that cares about clues. I was absolutely shocked to discover that even though this is a returning mechanic and not a brand new mechanic, there are no cards at common that make clues in black. Okay, there's two. That's it. With all that said, let's get started on our top 10 Pauper commanders from Murders at Karlov Manor. Number 10 is Harried Dronesmith. This is a 4-mana, 2/3 red human artificer. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. It gains haste until end of turn, sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. A great card that can consistently churn out disposable artifacts. If you need to be sacrificing artifacts, or if you need to be sacrificing creatures, it will do the job regardless. If you just care about sacrificing creatures, then they sacrifice themselves on their own. If you want something to sacrifice, they're perfect fodder. A really nice, reliable piece that will be nice to be able to have in the command zone if that's the kind of deck you want to build. Number 9 is Somala Rumblers. This is a 4-mana, green and white, using 2 hybrid Celestia mana. Star 4 Worm. Somala Rumblers' power is equal to the number of creatures you control, and it has Myriad. This card is fascinating to me. There's a lot of actual green-white, this card's power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control, cards that are available as Pauper commanders, which is really, really cool, and a lot of them I think are generally going to be people's preference over Somala Rumblers, which is why it's getting such a low ranking. Cards like Ironroot Warlord, Queen Alenla of Ruadak, or Wayfaring Temple all care about increasing your power, or toughness for some of them, based on the number of creatures you control, and have some extra benefit that lets you get more creatures. Wayfaring Temple giving you a populate trigger, Ironroot Warlord and the Queen Alenla of Ruadak creating extra tokens themselves here and there. The difference is that Somala Rumblers has Myriad. So not only are you making a couple extra tokens, although they're not going to stick around, so debatable, you're going to be able to dish out that damage across all of your enemies, which could be really, really fun if you don't want to be targeting down one opponent in a game of Commander. I think generally, I personally would like to go for Wayfaring Temple if I was building this deck, but this gives us more options in a similar archetype so that not every deck's going to feel exactly the same. Somala Sentry rounds out number 8. It is a 2-mana green and white 1/3. It has reach, and whenever a face-down permanent you control is turned face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and a +1/+1 counter on Somala Sentry. Now, what's fun about the disguise mechanic from Murders at Karlov Manor is that it is worded in a way that interacts with almost all morph effects. This does not say when a disguised creature or a cloaked creature is turned face up. It just says when a face-down permanent you control is turned face up, which means it interacts with all of our history of morph. There's not as much as you might expect in green-white, but there's enough that you could make a cool deck here, and it would have its own interesting flavor. Worth pointing out is the other disguise/morph interacting card from the set, Tin Street Gossip, is also quite interesting. It gives you red-green as an interaction point as opposed to green-white, but I think Somala Sentries is giving you more benefit for building around that archetype. Number 7, Gleaming Geardrake, is a 2-mana blue and red 1/1 artifact creature drake. It has flying, and when Gleaming Geardrake enters the battlefield, investigate. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Gleaming Geardrake. This could get massive in the right deck. And if we look at commons in blue and red, there is a lot of opportunities for this effect. Mostly Treasure Fall. We are going to want as many treasure producers as we can because we can sack them to make mana as opposed to costing us mana to sacrifice them. Yes, blue's going to give you a few investigate clue production, and that will be fine, but really, if you can make Gleaming Geardrake in a Treasure Matters deck, you are going to have a great time. Number 6, Aftermath Analyst. Aftermath Analyst is a 2-mana green 1/3 elf detective. When Aftermath Analyst enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You can spend 4 mana and sacrifice Aftermath Analyst to return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This is such a huge effect. And common is not a place where we don't have landfall that we could take advantage of. A really cool mono green self-mill deck that finishes the game by explosively putting all of your lands from your graveyard into play when you have some landfall commons is going to be absolutely absurd, and I'm very excited for it. We are getting to the point of the list where I'm going from these are cool and quirky to these are cool and going to be really good and fun. Number 5, Flourishing Bloomkin is a 2-mana green plant elemental. It's a 0/0 that gets +1/+1 for each forest you control. I wanted to take a look at other cards in green that have this same effect, and I was shocked how few I could find. This card is doing something that, while we've seen, has never been this cheap before, and that is so fun. A very easy build around. You just fill your deck with ramp, make a huge Flourishing Bloomkin, and get going. Now, I feel like the disguise effect of this creature is actually pretty bad, but it does give it Ward 2, which could let you get an attack in before you flip it face up. It's a possible line. I think you just play this, find some way of protecting it, and get it in, and have a great, explosive, huge 10/10. Number 4, Furious Spine Splitter, is a 4-mana green and red, once again with 2 Gruul hybrid mana, 3/3 Ogre Warrior. It has trample, and at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on Furious Spine Splitter for each opponent that was dealt damage this turn. I'm very excited for this because of how easily you can just ping every opponent. You throw them down, you have some effect that was already on the field that taps and pings all your opponents. It's already a 6/6. Then you do it again next turn, you do it again next turn, you do it again next turn. This thing is going to get out of control. This does mean you're going to need to find some way to protect it because it is going to be a target for removal, but what a huge commander for your deck. Number 3, Wisp Drinker Vampire. 4 mana for a white and black 2/4 vampire rogue. They have flying. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. For 7 mana, creatures you control with power 2 or less gain Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. Now we're getting into the really cool things. Not just one big boy who's going to hit face really hard, but someone who's going to give you this whole interesting style of deck. This is a Small Guys Matters deck. Little guys who are going to be able to make that relevant. Very fun archetype, very cool commander, very excited for this one. Number 2, Portal Manipulator for 4 mana, blue and white, once again with 2 Azorius hybrid symbols. You get a 3/2 human wizard with flash. When Portal Manipulator enters the battlefield during the declare attacker step, choose target player and any number of target attacking creatures their opponents control. Those creatures are now attacking that player. I really like this effect. This is effectively a fog, but instead of preventing all damage that's coming at you, you can say, don't fight me. I have 4 mana up. I will flash in Portal Manipulator and send all your big boys at your opponent who you don't want to be attacking into because they have a big army or something, right? And so you can pit 2 armies against each other. It's sort of like a different style of goad in a way. What I think is especially fun, though, is that blue-white gives us a lot of flicker, a lot of blink. We can continuously, once Portal Manipulator is on the field, we don't have to leave up 4 mana to flash them in anymore. Now we just have to leave up 1, 2, 3 mana to flicker them. And your opponent won't know if it's coming or not because it's not just sitting in the command zone with 4 mana open. They know it's coming at that point. Later in the game, you go, I don't know, do I have a flicker? Can I flicker Portal Manipulator? And if they send stuff at you, bloop, Portal Manipulator comes in, comes out, attacks your opponents. Now, what is the win con for this deck? I will leave that up to you. This is basically a blue-white control piece in your command zone. You can find your own way to finish the game out. I wish you luck. And number 1, the Crime Novelist. You knew it was coming. 3 mana for a red 1/3 Goblin Bard. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Crime Novelist and add red. This is the same effect almost as the Gearwing Drake that we saw earlier, except it doesn't have blue, it doesn't have flying, and it doesn't make its own token. But what makes it the number 1 spot is that not only is it going to get huge in a treasure deck, your treasures are now giving you 2 mana because you're also adding an additional red whenever you sacrifice an artifact. This is going to be so explosive, and I'm scared of this deck. This isn't the one I want to build the most, but it is the one I think is going to be the strongest and the scariest. Good luck out there. I wish you well. I've been Darcy Bits. This has been Murders at Karlov Manor and Ravnica Clue Edition, Top 10 Pauper Commanders. Have a good night.